And President Biden goes viral again for some odd stage movements, the latest on those vying for Trump's VP slot, and a massive debate looms near. All that and more coming up on this week's Campaign Catch Up. I'm Dan Andros, joined today by CBN Chief Political Analyst David Brody and host of the DC Debrief podcast, John Stolnis. Gentlemen, welcome back.
Hi, Dan.
Hello, Dan.
All right, let's start with this Biden video. I mean, this is just becoming, a viral thing that we're seeing it seems like every couple days. But this latest one now was at a fundraiser, and former President Obama can be seen sort of there waving goodbye, and Biden appears to be there for a moment, and Obama reaches out his arm and grabs President Biden's arm a little bit and sort of nudges him back, and they head off stage. And so what is happening here as far as the responses from each side? And obviously the Republicans are saying these keeps freezing again. What has the Biden campaign's response been, David?
Well, I mean, they're going to call it either a doctored or altered or fake video. Call it whatever you want. It's not. It's not none of the above. It's not altered or doctored at all. I mean, it's a spin by both sides. That's what this is. And for example, I mean, this is not any sort of AI situation or something that the RNC campaign cooked up and said, you know what, let's slow it down and make it about 5 or 6 seconds longer when Biden is freezing there on stage. He's not. But I think the Biden campaign clearly wants people to believe a certain, event or a certain, storyline, if you will, about what happened. And people are going to make up their own mind about it. I mean, the Republicans will capitalize on that. And if Biden freezes for 2 seconds, then, there it is. And they've got their storyline. But my personal view of it, I mean, just kind of like, I feel like we're kind of dissecting a sports play here for a second. Let's go to the videotape, as Warner Wolf used to say. It's pretty clear to me that he's just kind of in, let's be honest, a bit of no man's land, nowhere land for a couple of seconds, pulling a bit of a Mitch McConnell for a moment. And I think the mistake Barack Obama made is that what you should do there is you put your arm around the guy and kind of get you both kind of wave and to the crowd. Mm-hmm. Instead, he grabbed him by the hand like he was at some sort of shuffleboard tournament in South Florida, and then going to the Denny's after and taking your it's one of those situations, and it just looked bad. And I think that was part of the optics problem here.
Yeah, I had a great point. I mean, I had the same thought about it. Just put your arm around the guy and make it look a little more natural instead of yanking him off the stage a little bit. It was a little awkward. John, what are you seeing here as far as this particular issue, Biden's mental fitness? I mean, there's some recent polls that show that maybe this isn't going away. And where are Americans on this topic right now?
Yeah, I mean, many Americans, certainly most Republicans, look at President Biden and don't see someone who is doesn't seem to be mentally sharp, seems to get lost sometimes. Of course, the Biden supporters will say, that doesn't really affect his ability to do the job. So what if he doesn't know what exit to walk through at the end of a speech, or he doesn't know where to go? So if he gets kind of lost in translation, kind of a thing. I'm not a neurologist, so I'm never comfortable sitting there, whether it's Donald Trump, whether it's Mitch McConnell, whether it's President Biden saying, oh, this proves he's slipping, oh, this proves he's cognitively impaired, or anything like that, because that's not what I'm an expert. I didn't go to school to figure out exactly how far along the spectrum somebody is. I mean, it's just, but politically, the way it's playing out is somebody sees it and they make a snap judgment on it. And I think what Brit Hume, I think he tweeted something about it on Monday, echoing, I think, what David was saying just a second ago, in that, in this particular case, it looked like Biden was responding to the adulation of the crowd. They were cheering for him. He was enjoying the moment. It just looked like he was standing there. He was engaged for the few minutes right before then, clapping and kind of pointing along to the crowd, and then paused for a few seconds. And President Obama, the way he did touch him and bring him off the stage, made it look like he was trying to care for an old man. And I think Brit Hume's tweet even said the Biden administration, the Biden campaign, can't be happy with Obama for the way he handled that. So It's just, you're right. It's mostly an optics thing right now. Biden is old. He's 82 years old. We hear his voice is more frail. We see him shuffling now as opposed to a more confident walk. That's what happens when people get older. Whether or not that means he can continue to be the commander in chief, I think differs depending on what party you are a part of and you know what side of the ideological slant you fall on there. So again, I'm not a neurologist. I can't tell you exactly what it is we saw then or in any of these other instances with these octogenarian politicians.
Well, just a quick one. I don't want to say pushback, but I don't think it's just optics at this point. I think it's gone beyond that. I mean, if you look at the polling on this, I mean, Americans have come to the conclusion, and when I say Americans, let me be clear. It's not just Republicans. I mean, look at the Democrat numbers on this. They understand that Biden has some major challenges. I mean, that's not just Republicans saying that; that's Democrats. So the jury is in, if you will, and that's what is not just being seen. I don't think it's just optics. I mean, this is a potential national security issue. It does raise questions as to who is running the country. These are legitimate journalistic questions that people should ask. Where is the media? And not asking about, let's be honest, his mental health records. I know, HIPAA. I got it. I understand that part of it. But at the same time, he is president of the United States. And where are the deep dive questions about what exactly is going on with President Joe Biden behind the scenes in terms of how he's being cared for? Look, this is legitimate stuff. It's not funny. It shouldn't be laughed at. It surely is not ageism at all. Mm-hmm. I mean, you could be 175, and if you can do the job, you can do the job. And, and this isn't just about shuffling off of a stage. This is far more than that. And there's clip after clip to prove it. I think the only reason there's two reasons I think Biden gets a bit of deference from the media on this. Number one, I think the media is liberal, and I think they're willing to give him a pass. But also number two, Biden has always been a gaffe machine. He was at 35, he was a gaffe machine. Right. So he's already had that kind of narrative formed about him. So now he's just an older gaffe machine, and so people are just like, oh, it's just Biden. It's kind of like with Trump. That's just Trump. Well, you know what? Does that make it right? I just think that's part of the equation here. That's all.
Yeah, it certainly is, and we'll obviously keep an eye on kind of public mood on this and where the polls are, because it will be a big factor. And as we've talked about on previous episodes here, that even Democrats are concerned about this, and they're kind of in a conundrum. What do we do? I mean, we've got the sitting president here, but even some Democrats are like, obviously the age is perhaps settling in a little bit here, and so they're kind of in a pickle here as to what exactly to do, at least for some Democrats. So let's shift gears here a little bit. Trump's VP pick. We've kind of gone over these names. Have any new names popped up? I know a couple people were making the rounds on the talk shows here. What's the latest there?
I don't know that there's any new names. It sounds as though Tim Scott continues to be the leader in the clubhouse at this point. Little U.S. Open reference from this weekend. I think he's still the favorite. I think he would be. Politically speaking, with Trump making this push to try and increase the amount of African American support that he has in the country. He was in Detroit over the weekend at a couple of different locations, and as part of that push to try and grab some more of the African American vote away from Joe Biden, Tim Scott will likely help in that regard. But I think Congressman Byron Donalds has been much more out there. He was on the talk shows this Sunday and was asked about it, and was basically saying he would love the job and touting himself and his credentials and his ability to do it as well. But Senator Tom Cotton was also directly asked whether or not he'd be interested in running for vice president, and he said he would be happy to serve anything the president of the United States would ask him to do if he were elected, or the former president with Donald Trump. So the list is long, but it sure sounds like Trump in his mind, I think, has at the very least gotten it down to a very small number of people. That's been the reporting, and it sounds like the Republican National Convention is when, or right before it is when they're going to announce it, or either there when they're there in Milwaukee. I don't think it's going to be Tom Cotton. I don't think it's going to be Byron Donalds. Tim Scott just makes the most sense. He seems to be the guy that fits the easiest into what it is Trump is looking for in terms of a vice presidential candidate. So that I think that's still the most likeliest outcome.
David, do you see anything different there? What are you seeing on the VP front? I know you've had some thoughts on some of these other candidates that have been bandied about.
Yeah, Tim Scott definitely, is obviously a front runner. I think there's some issues with Tim Scott as it relates to. Let me step back. What's important here to Trump, right? You have to kind of look at it through that lens. Well, loyalty, number one, right? But beyond all of that, if you're looking for someone he's gonna pass the mantle to, or someone that is jiving with his populist policies, I'm not quite sure Tim Scott necessarily is the guy. I think that's where J.D. Vance enters the equation, and he's a lot more populist than Tim Scott. I mean, Tim Scott, and I'll have to do a double check on the record here, but I'm pretty sure he was okay with some Ukraine funding at the beginning. I'll have to double check that. He was never anti-Ukraine. I think he's now changed a little bit on that tune and questioning a lot more about where the money's going, et cetera. But he was kind of voting a bit with the establishment GOP for a while, and then it did change recently. So I'm not quite sure he's in tune exactly with the populist policies of President Trump. Is he conservative? Of course he is. But Trump isn't really conservative. It's always been Trumpism rather than conservatism. And I think J.D. Vance fits more of that populist mold. So I think J.D. Vance could be the pick. I think Tim Scott would be a serviceable pick. Don't think that, and John, I'm not saying you're saying this, by the way, but just because Tim Scott is black doesn't mean that he's going to resonate with the black community. I'm not saying you're saying that, but there'll be a lot of people that say, well, of course he's going to resonate. No, not at all. I just think that is too lazy of an argument to make by people out there. So just be wary of that. Now, Byron Donalds, I think, might be a good mix of both. He's a populist. Obviously, he's black. This just in, unless something's wrong on my screen, but I don't think so. And he has passion and energy, and he's very, very good on television. He's very good. So, and he's a bit combative too, which I think Trump will like. So, we'll see. Byron Donalds would be a stretch, though, guys, because Byron Donalds being a House member, being kind of young, I'm not quite sure if that might be a bridge too far.
Yeah, there's not really no name power there. I mean, I think you got to kind of be really paying attention to politics to have come across a lot just clips of him and stuff. So I don't know how big a name power he has.
I don't think it matters. Trump's big enough name for both. I don't think the name power means anything. I think Trump wants someone that's serviceable and that's not going to give him headaches. And honestly, and let's just bring it up here, is he going to pull a Mike Pence? Is he going to be a verb? Mike Pence has become a verb. Hey, he pulled a Mike Pence. In other words, it's January 6th. I mean, that's what Trump is also looking for here. In other words, is someone going to be loyal to the very end, whether it be bitter or not? He felt Mike Pence was not. A lot of people differ on that. But the point is that I think that's part of the calculation here. I think Byron Donalds might be one of those guys that could fit all three of those criteria.
Well, and to David's point there, one of the things that Senator Tim Scott was asked about in his interview, and I believe it was with ABC's John Carl this weekend, was whether or not he maintains that Vice President Pence did the right thing in certifying the election in that January of 2021, and he says yes, I still maintain that. So whether that means there's a fundamental shift or a break between him and President Trump on that issue, and whether that makes President Trump a little bit less likely to trust him in the way that David is describing is obviously going to be something that Trump himself would have to consider.
And that goes back to the establishment issue that I was talking about. Like that's where he naturally gravitates to a little bit more of the protocol, and I think that might be a concern. Having said that, it could be Tim Scott. I think it's going to be J.D. Vance. We'll see.
All right. Well, initial speculation. We talked about this last time, guys, on Trump's conviction and where that was leading the polls. There wasn't much movement last time we talked. There's a new political Ipsos survey out there now says 21% of independents say they're less likely to vote for Trump after the conviction. Now, that's Politico, so take that for what it's worth there. But are we seeing any more movement on this? I mean, like I said last time, and now we're even further removed from it. It's like the news cycle is just blitzing right along, and it's like that thing's in the rearview mirror. I know the sentencing will be coming up, but where are we on that? John, you want to start there?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because it's that conviction would have moved the needle that much. I think for most people who were not going to vote for Donald Trump, that didn't really affect it one way or the other. And for the people who are going to vote for Donald Trump, it didn't seem to affect their vote one way or the other. Like these folks who were waiting on that verdict to be the thing that kind of pushed them over the edge or made that decision for them, as opposed to the underlying facts of the case that Trump was accused of paying hush money to a porn star, the accusations of an affair and all that kind of stuff. For people who weren't going to vote for Trump in the first place, those things in and of themselves were disqualifying, or were at the very least reasons that they might go in a different direction. The guilty verdict of whether or not he violated committed a felony by violating some election law and making the payments, that specific slice of this would be the thing that would sway them to vote for President Biden or not vote for President Trump is interesting to me. And I would love to talk to those people about what it is about because that trial was not about whether or not the president actually did those things, have the affair, pay off the hush money. It was about whether or not they violated campaign finance laws as part of the felony conviction for that. So that to me is interesting. And I'm not sure exactly where that number is coming from, to be honest.
Well, yeah, there's a lot to unpack here, but I'll try to keep it really brief. First of all, we live in a polarized America, so you're not going to really have too many people that are waiting on pins and needles for this decision. There are going to be some. I'm not saying there aren't going to be. And Biden, I think for those people, Biden will get a boost. But how big of a boost? I think it's going to be marginal, or what they like to say in politics, at the margins. Now, if this election is won at the margins, which it could be, then it could be potentially significant. I have a feeling, Trump's out there saying this is the big MAGA slogan now. Let's make it too big to rig. I mean, that's what they're saying now. Let's make it too big to rig. And that seems to be the way it's going. I'm not suggesting it's going to be a Trump landslide, but all indications is that Biden is so much underwater with every single demographic. I mean, it's every single one. I mean, even African Americans, the African American vote, which we've talked about here, he's got problems there. The latest CNN poll, right, shows that he's, I think, under 50. Trump is like within 20 points or so of black voters under 50 points. That's unheard of. I mean, Obama was winning black voters 95-5. Biden was winning them 86 to I think it was 7. So in 2020, that's totally shifted. Guys, do you understand that Trump could win 20% or more of the black vote? I mean, guys, let that sink in. I mean, that's unheard of. I mean, he won 8% in 2016. He won 12% in 2020. He could win 20% or more of the black vote. I mean, that's just, it's unfact. I mean, even CNN, I think today there was a CNN pollster who does the poll, said he was left speechless at that number. The point is that if you go down demographic after demographic, I'm not quite sure when it comes to the conviction if it's going to matter that much, because Biden's underwater in so many other areas.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly interesting. I think we talked about this before as well, and I like to bring it up because people looking at these polls, they like to pick out polls and grab them and say, here, look at this one. Look at the RCP average.
That's right.
It's really good because you get a whole bunch of different polls and it averages them together. I mean, I've gone back and looked at the last several elections that they've been doing this, the general elections, and it's very close. It's very close to the RCP average. It's not far off. You're not going to find a big variation there. And right now in that, Trump has been steadily ahead anywhere from, right now it's just about at a point. And just in the last few months, I mean, he's been up a couple points, but steadily up in that. And he was not in those places before in the other elections, because if you remember, against Hillary Clinton, he didn't win the popular vote. So in the polling, he was actually behind a little bit, but it worked out where he won the Electoral College. And then against Biden, this time he was the RCP average. He was slightly behind the whole time and ended up about where it was. So very interesting to your point, David, about all these other polls and these areas that he's doing well. It's showing in the RCP average.
Well, and I would just point out that I think one key poll to look at always, besides the RCP, obviously that's number one, is enthusiasm. And enthusiasm is way down among Democrats for Biden and way up for Trump. And we haven't even had that first debate yet on June 27th. I think that's going to be obviously extremely interesting. I know there's one in September, but at this point, Joe Biden has to take it one at a time because he's going to have his hands full. I know Trump wants a drug test on this, and I know people scoff and laugh and go, ha ha, hilarious. And, because Biden's not going to agree to that. So I think that's the end of that. But for Trump to at least float it out there, I think is going to be a potential storyline for sure, especially if Biden does better than expected. But then again, just showing up and putting a few sentences together. I mean, what's the bar for Biden? I mean, and that's not a joke. Or as Biden would say, no joke, I'm not being facetious. I mean, really, it's true.
I think it's a real phenomenon, David, because we see these clips, and we were just talking about at the beginning of this segment. You see clips of Biden. Was he freezing? Is he not? And everyone's freaking out about that. And so you're right. The bar is set so extremely low. If he just goes in there, even if he's slurring a little bit or something, as long as he doesn't have a massive freeze on stage, people go, oh, you know what? He didn't look that bad. So, yeah, setting the bar low there, it's a real thing for this upcoming debate.
Yeah. And one of the things that will play, I think, will play in Biden's favor is some of the rules that have been set up for these debates. So there's not going to be an audience in there to hoot and holler or applaud or boo or anything else when these guys are talking or making their points. Another is that the microphones will be muted when it's not their turn to speak. So there shouldn't be a lot of crosstalk. I mean, there may be a lot of off mic crosstalk that's distracting. That wouldn't surprise me at all, because we've seen Donald Trump debate. He likes to jump in when he's not necessarily supposed to.
Hey, he's got zingers. I mean, that's what he's good at.
Yeah, he wants to get them out, and I get it. And when it was, if you're not going to enforce the rules of the debate, then you can make your own rules up, I suppose. So I think the format of this first debate with CNN could play in President Biden's favor, but perhaps not. And you're right, the bar has been set so low. Joe Biden doesn't need to do much to cross it. And the American people are just being told there's a double-edged sword here with the Biden is too old, he's too frail, he's not mentally there. If he comes out and is able to put together a decent performance in this debate, then some of these numbers that we're talking about may not look the same after the first debate. The other side of that coin is if he flounders, and I think David mentioned this on the show we did last week, then you might have Democrats starting to seriously talk about how can we go about finding a different candidate. It's going to be a really big debate.
Yeah. And, it's hosted by David. I want to get your reaction on just kind of, we talked a little bit about some of these rules that are set up. We got Jake Tapper and Dana Bash hosting there. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, don't get me started. Those are my thoughts on that. I mean, look, Jake Tapper, and once again, this is not analysis. This is just facts. Jake Tapper has been over the top critical of Donald Trump. I haven't seen quite the ferociousness of his criticism when it comes to Joe Biden. And that's being kind, by the way, to Jake Tapper. So I think people can understand where the moderators may be coming from. Now, I know I'm supposed to say, yeah, they're just moderators and they don't have a point of view. They're just that, yeah, okay, yada, yada, yada. And I got a bridge to sell you in Brooklyn, too. Okay, so don't start with me. But look, the truth of the matter is that I think that helps Biden as well. I do want to push back against the conventional wisdom that the muted mic could help Biden. I actually think it could hurt Biden because, in essence, Trump's going to say a lot of stuff. And Biden's handlers are going to be in some sort of padded green room going, oh, my gosh, he lied there. Oh, my gosh, he lied there. Oh, my God. And you know what? Biden's going to have 60 seconds and have to wait, or maybe a minute and a half to wait to respond. Well, you know what? With some of his difficulties, waiting 60 to 90 seconds is not good for the Biden campaign. He may forget something very important that he needs to point out. Now, he'll probably remember something in that 90 seconds, but it might not have been the key point that he needed to make in the moment. And with the mic muted, I think that actually could potentially hurt Biden. I can tell you right now, if I'm a Biden campaign staffer, I am a little concerned that Biden will forget to go after Trump on something that he said and will miss opportunities.
All right. Well, that debate's coming up on June 27th, and that is going to be. Is that the only one so far, guys, that's been booked? Because I know
No,
there
there's
was
one in September that I think there's a date for that too. I'm
just
pretty
one.
sure.
So because there's three, but I'm kind of forgetting off the top of my head of how many have actually been booked. Do you think there will be three, or is it just going to be the two?
The second one is on September 10th, and it's an ABC debate. Yeah, and so far those are the only two that have been agreed to so far as I know.
There won't be another one. No way.
All right. Well, gentlemen, I appreciate you stopping by and breaking down where these campaigns are at right now. We're doing this every week, so be sure to be on the lookout for this segment. We're going to catch up to speed on everything that's going on. And obviously it's going to be a little fast and furious here heading up to this debate. And then after it, as everyone's reacting to it, we'll see where the numbers go and all of the rest. So, John, David, thanks so much for being here and breaking it all down.
Thanks
as always.